Yeah, it was very. I don't want to pretend I know JJ Redick well. I spent a lot of time around the Sixers teams when he was there, so I knew him a little bit. And like everyone else, I consume his content. I guess would be the word he would use. I thought the press conference was very much him, and he's authentically himself. And I actually think the hire. I think the hire was a good hire. I think it's both ridiculous and good, right? Like I think he's actually somebody who is going to be good at this, and he's really smart, and has clearly spent the last year, if not longer, building this sort of database and planning for the job, right? You've heard him talk about this, the idea that he picks the brain of guys like Joe Mazzulla on the broadcasting, and probably has notebooks and notebooks full of ideas. The idea that he had this podcast with LeBron sort of adds this, I don't know, cartoonish aspect to it, just like and makes it seem more ridiculous. And it almost, to me, it almost. I know that probably helped him get the job. To me, it almost hurts him coming in, where I think he would have been a better candidate beforehand, if that makes sense, if had he not done the podcast with LeBron. And I don't think that's going to matter in the long run. It just sort of adds to the Lakersness of the whole thing. The press conference was very much him, though, and it's listen, him talking to the media every day. And I heard Stephen A. talk about this recently. How saying how, as someone who's worked with JJ regularly, and I think he said something along the lines of, I know how hard it is to get him to answer questions when he's paid to do so on a debate show. So I can only imagine what he's going to do in a media situation. I think there's going to be some combative stuff there, but also JJ is going to be somebody who knows how to take care of local reporters, and I think they're going to like him, and I think it's going to go pretty well for them this year.
Okay, we'll wrap up with this. Second round of the draft tonight, Bronny James. Is your best guess he goes to the Lakers, or do you think someone tries to mess with them and just say, we're taking Bronny at 52, we don't care?
I'd be pretty stunned. I think he actually falls into this interesting beneficial window for himself, where he's good enough, I guess, in theory, to be taken in the 50s, but not good enough where another team feels like it's worth jumping in there and grabbing him, where they feel like, you know what, we don't care who we anger. We think he's so good, and the upside is there's so much upside there that it's worth angering LeBron and Clutch. So I'd be pretty surprised if a team jumped in there. Like, what would be the reason, right? Like, what would they be gaining? The only team I've thought about is Philly, not because like the way Daryl Morey operates.
Oh yeah,
is that to him it's all an odds game. So if the idea of having Bronny means you now have a 1% chance of getting LeBron as opposed to a 0, like that might be an equation that he's interested in, as opposed to looking at it means that like, oh, I'm still not getting LeBron, because I don't think LeBron's going to any of these random places. So I think he ends up in LA, and I actually think I think they've done a disservice. I think LA would be good if he was willing to do the G League route. I know Rich Paul said that's not something they're interested in. I actually think that if they were willing to do that, then that could work, because he could be separate from LeBron and he could be sort of under the same umbrella.
Yeah.
Maybe you do a road trip, 2 road trips, they play together, but you're really not under the same roof, and you could develop. So to me, I actually think that would be the most beneficial for him. I'll be curious to see if Rich Paul and LeBron and Bronny hold strong on that no G League thing.
Yeah, I like it. Very looking forward to it. Yaron Weitzman, FoxSports.com. Thanks a lot for taking the time, buddy.
Thanks for having me.
All right. Coming up next here on The Herd, second hour is afoot. Everyone assumes Bronny will be a Laker, but will someone consider stealing him away? There's some Game of Thrones stuff potentially going on tonight in the NBA. Big swing for Mikal Bridges, who is a no-time All-Star, but has vaulted the Knicks, helped to third best odds to win the title behind Boston and Denver.
I think people are excited. You're going to have Knicks fans. You're going to have New Yorkers wearing Villanova gear, right? So that'll be pretty different. Yeah, I think people are very excited that this team is all in. This is sort of what fans have been waiting for since Leon Rose and Worldwide West took over in 2020. And Knicks fans knew that even though Leon Rose doesn't talk to the media or doesn't give out his plans, but it was pretty obvious that the plan was eventually to cash in all these chips they were collecting for a star. I'm sure we'll talk about whether or not Mikal Bridges is a star, but this was the move, and I think Knicks fans are excited to see, this team finally put together and what happens now.
Yeah, I saw you're on one website said the Knicks were, quote, fleeced by giving up 5 draft picks. Now, the Knicks, I believe, gave up 4 of their own and one of the Milwaukee Bucks. None of those picks in the next few years are going to be like a top 10 pick, unlikely, short of massive injuries. So is it really, do you consider it a fleecing?
Fleecing, no. Listen, they overpaid, right? If you're looking at it in a vacuum, like the amount of picks they gave up are more. I think it's more than the Suns give up for Kevin Durant, more than the Wolves give up for Rudy Gobert, and Mikal Bridges again is a zero-time All-Star. So if you look in a vacuum, they overpaid, but it's not how this works, right? The Knicks needed to make a move. This was the offseason to do it for certain cap reasons. They were going to run out of time, and in the future would have been harder to bring in another guy. Mikal Bridges also has a very good contract. He's under, I signed for another 2 more years at a reasonable number. Brunson is going to get an extension soon, so this was the time to do it. Also, the draft picks, at some point they lose their value as you go further and further into the future, and the Knicks are good. The draft picks lose their value, and I also think as the Knicks start looking down the list of quote unquote A-listers, and you start seeing guys and like Embiid's not asking out, and Giannis isn't going anywhere, and Karl Towns isn't a good fit, and the emergence of Jalen Brunson, which is a huge part of this, because I think this trade is also this combined with the OG trade is a double down on the idea that Jalen Brunson is we'll give a hat tip to Becky Hammond, but a 1A, right? Them believing this. So I think them deciding that, like whoever we get has to be somebody who fits well with him. So Donovan Mitchell would not work, for example. And you start looking and it's like there aren't so many good options. So they felt like this was the one to go for. And I think it was a good move. I think it was a good trade for both teams.
Yeah, there was some chatter about potentially Paul George being the guy they give up a war chest for. I don't know. I think probably too hot of a take, but I think the Bridges one makes more sense from a chemistry fit, from a salary, from an age. Your thoughts?
I would still go for Paul George over Bridges if it was the choice between the two. But one, I don't think it would have been that simple. Also, Paul George would have had to be a sign-in trade,
Yeah.
which means you'd have to give up a real asset. Probably Randall and some other picks would have been the move if the Clippers were going to do that. Bridges was obviously a trade, but they give up Bogdanovich. The picks were the real thing that the Nets wanted. And there is something to be said about Bridges being younger and the fact that he doesn't miss games. I think he hasn't missed a game since high school. And that's a really valuable thing, though I guess I think Tibbs will probably push that to an extreme, and it's going to be interesting, unstoppable force meets immovable object type of thing there. But no, I think it's a good trade. I think the Knicks are really, really well positioned right now.
Let me ask you, your pre-free agency top 4 in the East would be?
Pre-free agency. Well, to me, you got to go Celtics 1, obviously. Knicks 2. The Sixers are the interesting one. I'm going to throw them in Milwaukee as a 3-4. We can talk about the Sixers. The Sixers are the most fascinating team here going forward, right? Because they have basically 2 players on the roster in Joel Embiid and Tyrese Maxey, who's technically unsigned right now. He's a restricted free agent. For cap reasons, they're going to sign him after they finish their off-season moves. They're in a fascinating position because this is it. This is the window. And Daryl Morey's talked about that, right? He knows that this is the offseason they built towards. Again, we're talking about these little windows that teams have. The fact that Maxey wasn't yet signed means for cap reasons, the Sixers have this opening where they can bring in a third big guy. Paul George is obviously the target there. We'll see what happens. The Sixers are going to offer him a max deal, and the Clippers, we know, have not wanted to offer him that 4th year. So it'll be interesting to see if George decides he would rather take fewer years and stay in LA where we know he's comfortable.
Yeah.
Or if the Clippers decide to match what the Sixers do, that's going to be an interesting game of chess. But yeah, the Sixers to me, they're the fascinating team in terms of how they play this cap space, knowing that they have a window here and knowing that they have this Joel Embiid. How many more years of Joel Embiid's prime do you have left?
Yeah. I know JJ Redick, the new Lakers coach, he would love it if I brought up the Utah Jazz right now or the Orlando Magic, but I'm going to support my local engagement farmer.